Hey folks, this is Alex with the Community Project in collaboration with KG&U. Over the last year, we've made it our mission to try to understand the homeless situation within Boulder County. We've had the opportunity to volunteer with 4 local nonprofits that provide services to the unhomed community. We've been fortunate to build relationships with truly incredible people, both providing and receiving services. And what we've learned is as inspiring as it is heartbreaking. Through this series of conversations, we'll attempt to impart our experience onto you, our community. Thank you for your time and attention. This is Ground Up. On today's episode, we take a look at the situation of unhomed youth in Boulder. I had the pleasure of interviewing Bacci, the CEO of Together, Boulder's youth homelessness solution, as well as Benji, a 19-year-old adult who has lived experience being homeless in Boulder and has benefited from Together's programming. We start with Annie, who explains the history and objectives of Together, as well as the impact of the closure of The Source, Boulder's youth shelter.
This organization started in 1966, so next year will be our 60th.
And it started as Attention Homes, is that correct?
Yeah, as Attention Homes.
1966.
Yep.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, the world has changed a lot since then. We started, our founder was actually a judge here in Boulder County who was seeing young people who were involved in the criminal legal system. So he was seeing juveniles in his court that didn't necessarily belong in jail or need to go to jail, but there was nowhere else for them to be. And so the idea was created that young people need attention, not detention. And so Attention Homes was born, and it started with families just opening up their homes to youth in the community that were unhoused and needed that mentorship and support. And it's evolved over the years to become a homeless youth service provider.
That's a great start, though. That's a nice thing.
Yeah.
We need more of that these days, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
So you've been in the field, you said, for 20 years now, 21 years? Tell us a little bit about how you got your start.
I got my start just wanting to work in community. I had my fresh degree out of undergrad in social work, and I had really enjoyed getting to do internships and different things at the community level. I knew I wanted to work with young people. I was a young person at that time. And so I started working with an organization in Denver that had homeless youth service provision. And I started as a case manager working with young people who at that time were in their apartments. And, it was a different policy landscape that it was very much like young people had to earn their housing. So, it wasn't something that people were just entitled to. And this was in the adult system too back then. This was early 2000s, 2004, 2003. And, so youth were only eligible for the housing program if they were employed and or going to school. And so what ends up happening is sort of a sorting of the young people who get access to housing were often the young people that were already on a path towards stability because they had, their school, their employment figured out. They just needed that housing unit. And then the young people who were really struggling on the street with maybe their behavioral health, processing trauma, they weren't able to access housing or shelter or employment. They were just kind of left out of access to the system. And so there's been shifts over time over the last 20 years.
Has it just shifted back?
I think we're in a very pivotal time right now, and we're kind of like straddling that edge of, is housing first working? Does it work? And
didn't the Fed just take that off the table anyway? Aren't there now more requirements being put on people to get housing?
Yeah, I think there's definitely more rhetoric around it. But the reality is that the evidence supports having low barrier access to services. And so, whatever that looks like for different populations, for young people, who are adolescents and they're really developing in terms of, oftentimes when they come to be with us in their apartment, it's the first time ever that they've been in a non-congregate setting. They've maybe never slept in a room by themselves before. And so what do the supports need to look like there? might be a little different than like adults who've, had different housing opportunities in their lives and they know what it looks like to have an apartment or sign a lease or be responsible for your own space. So, I think that there's definitely an attitude shift amongst certain policymakers as to whether housing is something that should be a basic human right, which is what we believe here at Together, or something that you have to prove that you deserve or earn. And so I think that's always kind of been there. We had an acceleration in policy, I think, from 2008 till now that really said, like, no, wait, like people need, before they can even work on their behavioral health, their substance abuse, their employment, their physical health, before they can deal with any of that, they have to first have basic stability and safety. And so that's still the framework we operate with here at Together, because that's what actually works.
You guys had a recent setback a little bit with your youth shelter shutting down. What was the cause of that, and how has that affected your ability to provide services?
Yeah, that has been really impactful and really difficult for young people and our staff and our team here. The Source is our youth shelter here in Boulder, and it provided really a lifeline to young people, not just the overnight shelter for youth who are unhoused, but also drop-in and day services for youth who are in the community and they wanted to have a safe place to go to have a meal, meet with a staff member, case manager, take a shower, have basic supplies. And, what happened with the Source was Together, I've been here now almost 2 years as a CEO. And when I stepped in, there was some significant funding gaps, especially for our emergency shelter. And so we were looking at about $500,000 a year deficit operating that program. And it is hard, I think, for folks to understand emergency shelter. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. Because we serve minors at that facility, you have very strict licensing and staffing standards. So whether we had 14, 15 youth or one youth, we had to have the same staffing model. And so I started to talk with local funders about how do we address some of this funding gap. And we were working on having those conversations. It was a really difficult time because local government funding is also constricting right now. I think people don't necessarily see that a lot of funding to local governments flows from the federal level. So we were pushing forward having those conversations. And then we had an unexpected funding cut that was around $500,000 that we just weren't able to absorb and continue operating. And so we did have to pause our operations at the shelter. And now we're really working hard to stand back up our street outreach and drop-in services for youth. So even if we can't yet provide those overnight beds, again, we can still be that lifeline for youth in the community.
What happens to the kids? What do they do if the shelter's not there?
Well, there's several different options. All of them are, it's challenging to be an unhoused youth in the community, even when there is a shelter bed. But what we are really seeing with our street outreach team is that young people who are 18 or over, they can go to the adult shelter, All Roads, here. And so we're working with our partners at All Roads to talk through, can we have a dedicated referral relationship? So if we have a young person who our outreach team finds on the street, we know they're vulnerable, they need a bed that night, how do we make sure that All Roads can hold a bed for them? And then our staff could help them get to the shelter, help them get settled for the night, integrated into that environment. Because, what we hear a lot is, and I have been going out with the outreach team once a month, which is a favorite part of my job, getting to actually see and talk to young people. And they don't want to go to the adult shelter because, that 18 to 24-year-old, even though they're technically adults legally, they want to feel safe. They want to have relationship with folks who really understand what young people are navigating. And so we're working to set up some of those relationship and referral pieces. There are providers in the region that have beds for minors, so under 18. There are pretty consistently open beds for under 18. So it's a matter of how can our team help navigate them.
They're not locally, though, are they?
Not in Boulder County, in Loveland and in Denver. So
you're transporting people to these shelters? Or?
Yeah, we're working on how do we set up those supports when we restart our outreach efforts. And so it is patchwork. What we're trying to also figure out, and we're hoping to hold some listening sessions with youth and with the community of like, is there another model that we could use our building, the source for, like a shared housing model for youth? There are some nationally, some like dorm style arrangements for young people. And so what does that look like? What's the funding model needed? What's the appetite from our local community funders to actually get behind us so we can, reopen that space again for youth?
The one place that our community had providing safe shelter for unhoused youth has shut down. One consequence of this is we're going to have more children and young adults on the street being exposed to violence, crime, and drug abuse. Now we hear from one of those youth, Benji, a young man who's been experiencing homelessness on and off for the last year in Boulder.
I was at the bus station on a snowy night in February.
It's cold.
It was cold. It was cold. And another youth just walked up to me and was like, hey. And I was like, hi. And then we got to talking, and she told me about this place called The Source. And I was like, I didn't know there was a homeless shelter for like young people. So I was very interested. And I went there the next, like a day later, and immediately met a bunch of people exactly like me. And they have an intake process and all that. They make sure that you're not just some, angsty little whiny kid who left their parents. They make sure that you actually, this is your last resort kind of thing, which is cool. I think that's important.
To know know if there's any other options for people?
Yeah, they only have so many spots.
Yeah. How many spots do they have,
I believe 14.
Okay.
Only 14. And if you are basically the younger you are, if it's full up, you get kicked out if you're the oldest.
Oh.
That kind of thing. So they prioritize young kids, because there is minors there. They have to treat everybody like a minor, basically.
What do you think about the source getting shut down? What's that? How does that feel?
So I think in terms of taking, young people and turning their life around, that doesn't, happen very often anywhere ever. So that the fact that they were doing it somewhat is, it's cool. But yeah, a lot of kids went there and just played video games.
But they were safe there.
They were safe. They were safe.
That was the thing, right?
They were safe.
That's huge, right? Like these kids, like I know the folks you're talking about, and I'm tremendously worried about all of them all the time. They're not safe. They are not safe on these streets. There are people doing meth and fentanyl and crazy stuff. Like you guys are so young. You don't need to be around that stuff. Like no one needs to be around that stuff. And they had a safe place to go to. With that, they could get away from that and sleep.
Yeah.
And it's gone.
Yeah. There's, you're safe there. You're comfortable. There's comfort, which is important.
The people that worked there were great. I really enjoyed talking with those folks. They were really, really nice and seemed to really care.
Great people, yeah.
But it's just a resource that we don't have for the kids anymore. It blows my mind that something like that, something that important can go away.
Yeah, you think if Boulder could spend, $70 million to just put in a bid for a film festival, that they could, drop like a little bit of that to like do stuff that theoretically is supposed to help out young kids whose parents, want to beat them or sell them. Yeah, you'd think, but no.
It's strange.
Nope.
It's strange.
Well, that's how, like, that's pretty much all of it, isn't it? That's just how America works. It's how money works.
It's not
How an
how
oligarchy is ran.
I don't think it's how humanity works, though. I think you've met a lot of good people out doing a lot of these services around. And that's what I see. I see Boulder is full of very compassionate people that want to help. And they want to get out there, and they might not have a lot of money themselves, but they have time and they come out and they help.
Yeah.
If they had the money, things might be different. But the people that are helping
Yeah,
had
it's
the
true.
money.
It's true. I feel like there's a lacking in humanity with people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I met a lot of nice people, good people, kind of family, kind of like dynamic. But there are moments where you see people that are just devoid of, humanity.
Yeah. Most of the folks that I've met on the street have had severe trauma. The mental health issues and severe trauma, like, combined all the way. And then there's so much infighting among the folks on the street, people stealing everybody's stuff. And doesn't seem like there's a lot of trust among that community, right?
I've seen a lot of people get opportunities and just completely and utterly waste them.
Maybe they're not ready for that opportunity.
Maybe some of them are 30-year-old grown men and don't deserve any more chances.
Everyone deserves a chance, my friend.
Maybe second or third chances.
See, the thing is, if I gave you a plane and said you can have it if you can fly this to Jamaica, right? But you don't know how to fly the plane. Is it your fault you didn't get the plane?
Yeah, but if the plane is a landscaping job and Jamaica is showing up to work on time.
Touche. Now, here's this. If you are going to work at a landscaping job, but you're sleeping on the ground and you didn't get any sleep and you have bipolar disorder and you happen to be down in your out of your manic cycle and you just hit the depression cycle and you feel like hell, can you go and work?
No,
No.
but maybe, I don't know.
What I'm saying is they might not be able to fulfill that opportunity because something hasn't been dealt with first. The
Right.
treatment of something that's happening, which maybe led them to be on the street, hasn't ever been addressed.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, isn't it?
Trauma is a very real thing. The level of trauma that people experience and the impact upon that individual varies. Until we can find a way to help our neighbors heal from their trauma, our community will continue to be at odds with itself. Here's Annie explaining how we as a community can come together to work to make positive changes, as well as the state of Boulder's current homelessness response.
Yeah, I mean, I think that funding piece is important. So a lot of times doing what I do, I get asked like, well, I have this young person in my life and they want like some money, they're not housed and they want some money, and should I just give it to them? And thinking about like, can you support organizations in the community that are already equipped and ready to work with young people and get them transitioned quickly out of homelessness? So the funding piece is big. I think there's an awareness piece. So like I was saying, we all know and see the encampments in the areas of the city where there's a big unsheltered adult population. And oftentimes there are young people that are sprinkled within those encampments. And that's another important piece to get our outreach back out there again, because they know, where young people are. And even adults who are unsheltered will tell our team like, hey, we saw this young person hanging out here. Like there may be an intent with this person. I don't think it's totally safe. And so that piece is big. Just awareness of like, there are youth in this community who are experiencing homelessness. And then from a policy level, like, we do have an active community that likes to reach out to their city council members, that likes to reach out to the county commissioners. And I think understanding that, local government, especially now with the federal government pulling back from a more aggressive approach to solving homelessness, it's going to really rely on local city and county, state governments. So how are they making sure, they're not just saying, I don't want these people in my neighborhood anymore, but they're understanding like, well, what directly is the solution? Is there, a new housing, tax that we could run, or is there a new funding source that would really significantly change the landscape? And how do we get that done? So I think that's a big piece too.
Yeah, it's kind of looking like we might have more people on the street here by the end of 2026 if all this stuff gets cut like they say they're going to cut. How do you think that will impact your guys' services as things maybe, I don't want to say get worse, but have more people maybe transitioning into the street? Are you guys able to handle?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we're able to grow as funding is available for us to grow. I think that, we're always open to innovative models. So, thinking about like I was saying with the source, can we try something that's been tested in another community for youth that maybe we could open up like dorm style housing or something like that. So how do we adapt to what we're seeing? We talk to young people all the time. So sometimes that's how we learn, like, hey, things are changing. Like it's harder for us. We can't get access to the rec center anymore. And so we don't have a place to take a shower. And then how do we respond and kind of help create some of that infrastructure in the community? So that's one piece, is just like being on the ground and listening. But, as homelessness increases, it's going to impact young people too. I think Boulder in this community, we've increased the number of supportive housing units significantly in the last few years. And so we've actually done a pretty good job. There's just a city just did an updated strategic plan around addressing homelessness. And the data was actually showing that we were having less people come in, or like holding steady even with higher numbers of homelessness, less people, needing the shelter every year. So it's like, I mean, we're still full, but some cities you see, they might house 200 people a month and 1,000 people become homeless. And I think that's where there's really an important tipping point, is like, no matter how good you are at rehousing people, if you have more people flowing in, then you're able to stabilize and get out, then you're going to have that explosion of unsheltered homelessness. And that's what we're seeing in Boulder and many communities, especially in the West, where housing costs are quite high.
We can't heal our community from without. Healing has to happen from within. When we stop identifying with the problems, we can start building solutions together. It truly does take a village, folks. These are our children, and they deserve better. Nobody likes homelessness. No matter what your opinions are, nobody likes homelessness. We can find a solution to this together. To find out how you can help the youth in Boulder, please visit Together's website at together.org/get-involved. That's TGTHR.org/get-involved. If you'd like to find out more or how you could assist, please contact us at info@thecommunityproject.org. To watch the full interviews or contribute to our fundraising campaign, check out our website at thecommunityproject.org. You can access our social media and donate from there. When contributing, click the donate button from the drop-down, select services. 100% of the donation specified as services will go directly to provide for individuals experiencing homelessness. We would like to thank our sponsors for helping make our outreach work possible. ARC Thrift Stores, Eldorado Springs, Super Team Protein Bars, Conscious Alliance, the Colorado Eyeglass Recycling Center, and the Denver Lions Club. And of course, KGNU. A special thank you to our service organization partners, Deacon's Closet, Colorado Friendship, Annie and Millie's Place, Socket to 'em, and City Pack. Ground Up's music was written and performed by Blaze Keene, a gentleman currently experiencing homelessness in Boulder County. You can access his music on BandLab at BlazeK_solo project. Thank you for listening, And I assure you folks, it is better together.